This summer we've been walking or running through a series called Who Is, taking a closer look at some of the major, minor, and often overlooked figures in Scripture. Today's question is, who is Jeremiah? More than a bullfrog, I'll tell you that. We know the name. He's got a whole book to himself. You may even know a few of his verses by heart. But how well do we really know the man? So Jeremiah was a prophet, and whenever we talk about prophets, we have to untangle a common misunderstanding. We tend to think of prophets as fortune tellers, gifted with divine crystal balls. But in truth, prophets weren't primarily those who saw the future. They were those who saw the present, really saw it, which if you think about it is no small gift. Seeing the present for what it truly is, beneath the slogans, beneath the spin, beneath the surface, that's an act of courage. And because the prophets saw the truth of their present moment with such painful clarity, they often foresaw a very different future than others expected or wanted. Prophets didn't predict, they perceived. They named reality as it was, and as you might guess, that didn't make them terribly popular. Now, Jeremiah didn't go looking for this job of prophet. The job found him, and when it did, he wanted out. He tried to return it like a pair of shoes that didn't quite fit. I'm just a kid, he told God, too young, too green. But God, with divine clarity and unmistakable grace, said, "Don't say that again." And who could blame Jeremiah for being a bit hesitant? This was not a time for spiritual lightweights. Jeremiah's ministry began during the most devastating chapter in Israel's history. The Babylonian army, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, swept through Jerusalem like a storm. They burned the temple, razed the city, hauled the people away in chains. Exile, displacement, despair. It fell to Jeremiah to interpret this catastrophe, to help people make sense of the suffering. For 26 chapters, he offered hard words, words sharpened by grief, carved by anguish. This is not a book for sentimentalists, but alongside Jeremiah's bracing realism were others, prophets of ease, peddlers of comfort. One such voice is a man named Hananiah. He appears just before our reading today. Hananiah told the exiles, "Relax. This will all be over in like 2 years. God's going to fix it. Nothing to worry about. Just chillax." Now, that sort of talk can sound like faith, but turns out to be fantasy. Jeremiah, for his part, said no. Just that a holy no. No, this will not be over soon. No, this pain will not vanish on schedule. No, we cannot pretend this exile away. It can seem cruel to deny hope in such a moment. But I thank God for Jeremiah's refusal to slap a cliche on heartbreak. There are times when everything will be fine. It's just not all that helpful because it's untrue. You may know the feeling. I suspect you do. I know I do. Sometimes the worst thing we can hear in the midst of heartbreak is someone chirping, "It'll be okay. The sun will come out tomorrow," and all that. Pollyanna, because sometimes it just won't. And sometimes in our rush to hope, we skip the honesty. We dismiss the pain rather than face it. And pain dismissed has a way of digging deeper into the soul. Jeremiah is a reluctant prophet. But more than that, he's a realistic one. He knew what we know, that the ground can shake, that marriages end, that cancer doesn't always go into remission. He knew that wars rage and jobs are lost and mental illness lingers and children suffered and hatred persists. That's what exile feels like when the world no longer looks familiar and the night never seems to end. Some prophets call it exile, others wilderness. Either way, it's a place where we would rather not be, a time we would do anything to escape. And in such moments, the shallow optimism of Hananiah rings hollow. So Jeremiah says something else. He speaks a different kind of hope. You know what, he says? We're going to be here for a while. So settle in. And then comes this astonishing word from God through Jeremiah. He says, even in this exile, even in this place and in this time, in this situation you don't want to be, build houses, live in them, plant gardens, eat from them, marry, raise children, seek the welfare of the city where I've sent you. Now that's not the pep talk we or they were expecting, but maybe it's the one we need. Plant gardens, he says. Gardeners, I think, are among the most hopeful people I know. They kneel down in the dirt, hide seeds in the earth, and they do the thing I'm really, really bad at. Wait. They water and they weed and they tend and they trust. Day after day with no evidence anything is happening. Gardening, you see, is not for the impatient. It's not for those who need proof by Tuesday. It's for people like Jeremiah. It's for people like Graham Jeffries. Graham was a beloved member of this congregation, one of the first doctors at the Med Center. He loved painting and he loved clocks and he loved to garden. A few years ago, I visited some members at Country Meadows, and there was Graham, frail in body but steady in spirit, walking with a trowel and a box full of bulbs. I helped him to the garden bed there, and as he knelt to plant, I asked him gently, "Graham, aren't you moving soon? You won't be here to see these bloom." And he gave that signature chuckle, and that twinkle in his eye lit up, and he said, "You're right. I won't see them bloom, but someone will, and they're going to love their new garden." Build houses, plant gardens, not short-term work, but work that lasts, hopeful work. Years ago, Stephen Colbert spoke at a college commencement. He told the students to live by one simple rule: yes and. It's a rule from the world of improvisational comedy. Whose line is it anyway? In improv, when a scene partner says, "We're doctors," the only way to keep the scene alive is to say, "Yes, and we're doctors, and we're on the moon." The story moves forward when you accept what is and you add to it. Colbert said, "You are entering a life with no script. You'll meet people in places you've never seen. You won't be in control. So say yes. Say yes and." That's Jeremiah's advice too. Say yes and to life, even when life is not what you wanted it to be. Yes, this is exile. Yes, this is painful. And still, we build, we plant, we live. We find another way to celebrate Thanksgiving dinner. Can't go out in the pool, yes, but we can play games inside. Yes, and. And here's the beautiful thing about yes, and. It doesn't erase what came before. It doesn't dismiss the sorrow. It simply insists that sorrow will not be the final word or the only word. Yes, and let's build houses. Yes, and let's plant gardens. Because if gardeners are the most hopeful people I know, then gardens are some of the most hopeful places I know. Surely Jeremiah remembered another garden in Genesis where God knelt in the dust and formed us, where creation burst forth in color and sound and breath. And while it wasn't his story to tell, it is ours, how in another garden on Easter morning life erupted again. The tomb was empty, and the gardener, who was, of course, Christ himself, met Mary with resurrection in his voice. In the garden, life comes to us. The poet Christian Wyman reminds us of one more garden, the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus wept and whispered, "Not my will, but yours." That, Wyman says, was not resignation, it was action, a choice to stand in the tension, a choice to say, yes, this is the cross, and still I hope. Hope is not a response to circumstance, Wyman says. It is a condition of the soul. Christ had hope in the garden, not because he had reason to, but because hope was rooted deeper than reason. And he stands with us still in our garden of grief or sorrow or pain. So if you are in exile today, if you are in your wilderness, in your Gethsemane, if you find yourself in a place you never would have chosen, well, Jeremiah still speaks. Build, plant, keep going. If life isn't the way you thought it would be today, if the situation in the world is not where you want it to be, sometimes you might say, well, let's just step back, let's give up. No, you say, yes, this is the world we live in. And there's still so much beauty. It may not be everything you wanted. Every policy, every war, every natural disaster, everything doesn't go the way you want. Yeah, it's always been like that for the past 100, 200, 2,000, 6,000 years. You say yes, and I'm still going to build a house. I'm still going to plant a garden. I'll still marry and have kids and have friends, and I will interact with this beautiful world, and I will put a bit of my love into it. I'm going to make friendships, because sometimes the best thing the world can do, the best thing the world needs, are people who live and love and plant. Yes, and. Because Jeremiah knew the world was always stitched together from opposites: beauty and brokenness, joy and sorrow, light and dark, death and resurrection. To deny that is to miss the complexity of life. We live in the tension. We live in the yes and. Yes, there is pain, and there is healing. Yes, there is division, and there is reconciliation. Yes, there is death and resurrection. You do not have to choose between them. We do not have to pretend. We just have to live into the tension and trust that somewhere in the mess, God will meet us. That realization and the freedom it brings may be the greatest gift Jeremiah gives us. Yes, and life will not be perfect. You will at some point be in your exile. You will at some point be in your wilderness. You can languish there. You can wish it away, but it's not going anywhere. Or you can say, yes, and I'm going to find the way to live my best days, even in the midst of what could be my worst. And that's living in faith, and that's living in hope. And I remember that at this table, on what could be Jesus' worst day, knowing I'm about to be arrested, I'm about to be crucified, he still says, here's a meal. Remember me. Here's my love, and here's my grace. And he spent that evening with disciples, telling them all he wanted to tell them. But most of all, he was with them in love. What could have been his worst day, focused solely on that, he still lived his life. Yes, the cross is on the horizon, and my disciples are with me. So we're going to eat, and we're going to share, and we're going to be together. And this is the meal he shares with you this day and every day. A reminder of God's grace, a reminder of God's presence, that nothing can separate us from the love of God. No exile, no wilderness, no pain, no death. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. And that's what we put our hope in this day, every day.